So tonight I'm going to focus more on prosecution of white-collar crime, and go to the next slide. So I'm going to admit right off the top that this is going to be a little ethnocentric, because what I'm going to discuss is white-collar crime in the United States. And we're in Portugal, a beautiful country, and I wish I knew more, but my work has been focused in the United States. So if there's something that doesn't make sense, since we're in Portugal, just ask me. I have no problem answering questions, but it will focus on the United States. This is what we're gonna do tonight, is where have we been for white-collar crime, where are we now, and where are we going? And so those are the topics, some more in depth than others that I want to talk about. And certainly the present time is what I'll focus on as we get into the full lecture. And then a little bit about the future. We are in such uncertain times that I almost took that out. It's like, wow, we don't know what might happen in the future. But I'm gonna take some guesses. We'll call them educated guesses, right? So the one thing that you have to talk about when you talk about white-collar crime is Edwin Sutherland. Of course, he is the person that comes out. And in fact, I read a lot of articles on white-collar crime, and there are times where I've read them and I thought, oh, not again, Sutherland, can't we let him go? Because we keep hearing about him over and over, but we can't let him go. He is, I would call him the guru. He was the guru of white-collar crime. And of course, in 1939, he introduced the term white-collar crime. And this does have a good story behind it, because he did it as his presidential address, right? To the American Sociological Society. And guess what? Let's see if this works. The American Sociological Society. Okay, for people that are on Zoom and can't quite see what I wrote, that boils down to ASK. They changed their name, so it wasn't like this. And I had put that in one of the papers I wrote, and the editor changed it. Didn't want me to put in the American Sociological Society. So we know that Edwin Sutherland introduced this, and he talked, yeah, it was a miasma, a fog of all these different crimes, where we had swindlers, we had robber barons, which he talked a little bit about, fraudsters, business types that are leading businesses. But one of his goals there was to introduce differential association. He wanted to promote his theory. And Gil Geist, who was my mentor, he always told me that if you really want to become famous, especially if you're young and thinking about an academic career, Gil would tell me to develop a theory and then stick with it the rest of your career, no matter what, and you'll become famous. Defend your theory at all costs and never do anything else. And I said, well, I guess I'll never be famous, and I'm okay with that. But Sutherland wanted to have this theory of differential association. He did not specifically look at corporations until the book came out the next year. And he renamed the book was called White-Collar Crime, that he came out in 1940. So that's enough about Edwin Sutherland. We know that he gave us a great basis to start with. He gave us very little as far as definitions, but he called attention to white-collar crime, and that's what we needed, and that's what he did. He certainly left us with some definitional problems, right? Thank you. I got a big yes. How do we define white-collar crime? And this drives students crazy. So I've been teaching it for a long time, and they want to walk away with a definition. This is what white-collar crime is. And I say, okay, we're going to work on this through the whole semester. And by the end of the semester, there's still not a definition. So you can take and look at white-collar crime from the offender aspect, who's committing the white collar crime. You could look at it from the offense, what type. So how many people, and I can't see the Zoom people, but you have to raise your hand anyway. Rita's watching you. So how many people think that embezzlement is white collar crime? Room, raise hands. Do I get any hands over there? Embezzlement, white collar crime. I'm getting a, come on, work with me. Oh, yay, okay, very persuasive. Come on, raise your hand.
Kelly says pink collar crime.
Kelly does, yes, pink collar crime. So what if I embezzle, let's say $300, I work at a bank and I embezzle $300. I'm a bank teller. And white collar crime? Doesn't seem like it, does it? A middle job, bank teller, not very much money. What if I'm the bank manager and I manage to embezzle $5,000? Oh, let's go big. Let's go 100,000. It's a big bank. It's Wells Fargo. I'm going to go big. And so I embezzle $100,000. Is that white collar crime? Oh, now I've got all your hands up. What's the difference here? The difference is, number one is the offender and the placement of the offender. And then what's the second one? The amount of money. Okay, so those are things that we can't quite figure out. I argue, and I have for a long time, that embezzlement indeed, and Kelly will disagree with me because she likes pink collar crime, and it could be pink collar crime. I argue that it is white collar crime. And so there are other academics out there that say I'm wrong, and I'm okay with that. I've learned to live with that, but we can't come up with a great definition of white collar crime. And so we do have an area where we have white collar crime. The one area that has become a little bit more clear is corporate crime. But I'm going to add some things in tonight that's going to make it a little messy. That's what I think about white collar crime. It's messy. Okay, and unlike other crimes. Let's see, I'm just checking to make sure that I'm following. The other thing about white collar crime that has always puzzled me is, and this goes back to an argument, if you haven't read the argument between Paul Tappan and Edwin Sutherland, it's fun. It's old, but it's really fun to read how they argued about what exactly white collar crime is. And in fact, at the time that happened, Sutherland was the editor of the journal that Paul Tappan had sent his paper into. And because he didn't agree with Sutherland, he wasn't going to print it. He finally did. He agreed to print it. That's another one of those rumors that go around. It's like Sutherland sleeping with his teaching assistant. I know, that's a secret. So anyway, where was I? Oh, is it white collar crime is a legal act? Certainly. We have statutes and legislations and laws and ordinances that make it it's illegal. Can it be an unethical act? I see a head shake, yeah. Can we call that white collar crime? Is it a crime if it's not defined? But one of this popped up in my research on fertility scandal. It was a crime to steal cow eggs, take your eggs from your cows, and somebody steal those. That's bad. But if I stole eggs from women, it was not a crime. It was unethical, but it wasn't defined as a crime. And that's a problem that we face when we're thinking about white collar crime. And there are certain scholars that have in the past, I think, believed that unethical or immoral acts could be considered white collar crime. Even though, and especially now that you think about technology and how fast things are going, the law cannot keep up with that. So there's a lot of wrongdoing that's happening. It's not defined as a crime yet. So we have to think about that. And then, so this opens everything that I've been leaning towards, opens up this door of how do we prosecute? What do we do about the bank manager who took, how much did I get? 100,000? I'm actually starting to get greedy. I want a little bit more. So I am going to use this guy as my framework, my case study on white collar crime tonight. His name is Kent Theory. He was the CEO of DaVita Inc. His trial started today. It's a federal charge, and it's being tried in Denver. And it's somewhat special. So when we look at this guy, he is typical of what we think of white collar crime, right? White, male, business CEO. There's your white collar criminal. So it's just recently that we started talking about women being white collar criminals, and that's a whole different lecture. I won't do it, but don't get me there. But so we see this guy Kent as CEO, and typical white collar criminal. He is up there in the corner. That is his house in a suburb of Denver. I mean, my house would fit in that little tiny part of that house. Amazing. This up over in the right-hand corner, he liked to dress up as a musketeer. And so he would have meetings with his people at the company. I don't know if you remember or seen any of the Ken Lay meetings where Jeff Skilling would get everybody excited about what they're doing for Enron. He would do the same thing for this company that was into kidneys and dialysis. Okay, that's what they did, and it was a for-profit company. Only 2 of them in the United States, for-profit company, and so he liked to dress up. And he could do whatever he wanted. He had lots of money. And one time, he actually came into this meeting riding a horse, dressed as a 3 Musketeer. So, so they're treating people for a very serious condition, really serious. And this company was a repeat offender. So I wrote down the amounts. They had paid out $389 million for a scam where they were having doctors refer patients to their clinic, and then the doctors would get the kickback. Scam. And then they had patients die because of that.
Mike, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, thanks. And then they also had paid out over just almost $1 billion in settlements because patients were dying. They had different scams where they would have the person come in. They ran it like a, I can't think of the right word, but people lined up to come in, have your dialysis, and leave, right? It's a serious, terrible thing to have, to be on dialysis. And so they often would rush patients. They wouldn't be able to finish their treatment, but they had somebody waiting, so they'd rush them out, and they wouldn't clean the equipment correctly. They had a scam where, for insurance billing, where they would take a little, let's say a patient needed 100 milligrams of this drug. And so instead of just taking a 100 milligram jar, they would take 25 milligram jar and a 50 milligram jar, and until they got up to 100, so that they could charge more on the insurance. They could charge for each jar that they were giving to that patient. So they were running a lot of scams. They had paid out a lot of money. This is what this company under Kent was a habitual offender. So finally, the way that they got him, and this is unique because this is the very first criminal case where somebody is charged under the Sherman antitrust law. And this is a law that's 132 years old. And they are charging him for, under antitrust, for poaching, non-poaching agreements. So he got together with 3 other companies, and they decided that they would not hire each other's employees, right? Okay, so non-poaching. So I can't come over, you're my executive researcher, I can't come over to the other company and hire you. You're stuck there because nobody in this group is going to hire you. You have to stay where you are. The victimization is to the employee, right? You're so smart that you could probably go to a different company and make twice the salary. And you could advance your career. So there was victimization, and they have charged him with this criminally. And it's going to be fascinating. I will touch base with Rita and let you know what happens. There's a big part of me, as much as I love Portugal, I wish I was in Denver watching this trial. I'd love to see this trial, but maybe they'll put it on YouTube. What do you think? The other part of, as I talk about this, is that never believe anybody who writes the white collar crime does not have victims. And in fact, I just read it someplace, and as I was preparing for this lecture, and I thought, oh, you got in this day and age, there are victims with white collar crime, whether it's environmental crime, leukemia clusters in the Woburn case, people who had kidney disease, certainly some of them died of victimization. We had about embezzlement. Somebody has lost it. In fact, I talked. She had, her mother lost $4 million from embezzlement. So and people that suffer that let's take Bernie Madoff as an example. Ponzi scheme. You buy into it. You want to get rich quick, right? That's your goal. So Madoff looks good. And then how do you feel when you find out this is a Ponzi scheme? You feel the same way any victim of a crime would feel. You feel ashamed. You feel that you deserved it because you didn't research it further. You didn't know what was going on. It is, I challenge you. I like this. I'll use this for my class too. I challenge you to find a white collar crime where there's not a victim, someplace, somehow. I think that's a good exercise, is to try. So we need to keep the victimization always as we're thinking about white collar crime. And this is, if you want to do research, this is understudied. Victimization is so important. So just a little bit of background, and this is some basic things that we have in the United States. There's a lot of different ways to go after white collar criminals. It doesn't happen as often as we'd like to see it. One of the problems is that police, law enforcement, are ill-equipped to go after white collar criminals. They don't have the expertise. It takes computer forensics, accounting forensics, and it takes a lot of energy to follow the paperwork and follow the money and figure out what happened. So often law enforcement they're not very good at this. In Denver, we do have an economic crime unit that deals just with white collar crime, but typically you're going to see civil cases. Criminal cases are rare, and that's why I think that Kent Theory, what was his last name? Go back for just a second. Kent Theory is such an interesting case because it's the first criminal case that's been charged like this under the Sherman Act. It's similar to when, we always use the example of the Ford Pinto, little tiny car. I look at Rita because we've got the little green car. That's not a Pinto, is it? Oh, good. I'm driving around with Rita. But the Ford Pinto, if you crashed it, if it was a crash and it was in the rear end, they would blow up and people died. And Ford knew that was going to happen. They did a cost-benefit analysis, and we have plenty of evidence that shows this is true, that it was less expensive to just put them on the road and let people die and pay off the settlements than to recall them and fix it. And they were probably, I think I'm right about this, the first corporation that was charged criminally. And so they went after them with criminal charges. But how did I, oh, for criminal charges. So we see some of that. Oftentimes, white collar crime is a regulatory agency. We have a lot of different agencies in the United States. If it's the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, occupational safety is OSHA. Of course, the FBI does some, and I'll get into that a little bit more, does some of the white collar crime prosecution, and then you also ultimately they could face professional disciplinary actions. So a doctor who misbehaves, it just doesn't have the impact. A doctor who commits crime, could possibly lose his or her license and not be able to practice medicine anymore. There's a list in Colorado of all the lawyers who have lost their license or had complaints against them. Doctors, do you look up your doctor to see if they have any complaints against them before you go to see them? If they've paid any settlements, I mean, usually they're done very quietly, so you're not going to see. But if there's been a complaint to the regulatory agency about a doctor, that's online, at least in the United States. There's a database. There's also a national database that you can't get to, but very few of us look up our doctors. Think about, this is the only person that you would, I think, most of you, I'm saying this is the only person that you would walk into a room and undress for, a complete stranger. And you don't know if they've had problems in the past with their license. You don't know if they were drunk last night or now they're high on marijuana. Everybody in Colorado is high on marijuana right now. But so that we have to trust them. And I'm not so trusting, I always look them up and then torture them. But you have to think about that. But the regulatory agencies, the professional agencies are there to help keep track of wrongdoing. And with doctors, they can move from state to state in the United States because it's so big. They can move to a different state and apply to be work at a hospital, and nobody knows what their past is. And other hospitals will not report them as having problems. So that's very common for us. It's difficult to get at them. Let's see. We're going to see that oftentimes it's rare that we get and the numbers are shocking, that we see the prosecution of somebody who's committed white collar crime, whether it's corporate crime or any other crime. Why don't we go after embezzlers? So I'm going to pretend, I know you disagree with me, I'm going to pretend that embezzlement tonight is a white collar crime. We don't go after them because companies don't want you to do that. They don't even want to report the crime because it makes them look bad. They can't handle their finances. They had somebody that stole all their money. They don't want to, and then they don't want to have a prosecution that becomes public. So oftentimes we don't see any prosecution at all for white collar crimes. There was an increase in prosecution starting in the 1970s, okay? So yay, we're so happy. We're gonna start prosecuting. Guess what happened? Down. I'm gonna show you a graph of what actually happened with the numbers on the sentencing of white collar criminals, but wow, okay. We're upset when something big happens. Enron was one of the big ones in the United States, along with Tyco, WorldCom. Those all happened together, and they were egregious corporate crime. And so everybody's upset, and we're going to prosecute those people. Then things calm down, and nobody's thinking about white collar crime. So typically, it's driven by political and public sentiment, okay, which is really too bad. We need to prosecute white collar criminals. the harmful effects, which people do not recognize. And in fact, I'm really pleased to see that we're having more and more academic literature look at victims. Greg Barak is, he's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of White Collar and Corporate Crime. And he's done some fantastic work looking at the victimology aspects. And he has a new book coming out, which I'm excited about reading, but we're starting to see that. White collar criminals, especially corporations, do not respond to general and specific deterrence. You've got corporations, and this was identified by the early work with Donald Cressy and John Braithwaite, people who looked at white collar crime, and you could see that there were repeat offenders. We had career criminals and nothing was happening. So typically, general deterrence doesn't matter. Okay, well, they got in trouble, but they'll never catch me. And specific deterrence, well, there's always what they see as a loophole in laws. And so they can justify, I guess that really goes to techniques of visualization. They can justify what they're doing. Well, I'm not breaking any law. So, hey, it's okay for me to do this, even though it might be illegal someday or immoral. Financial punishment. So you look like a nice person. Do you drive? Good. Okay. So you drive and you speed. Terrible speeder. And so as a police officer, I pull you over and I give you a ticket because you're going 25 miles over the speed limit. That's really fast. And I give you a ticket, and so you have to pay for this ticket. You have to pay $10. Send in $10. Okay, how's that sound? Pretty good? Not bad at all. Okay, let's say let's say the next time I see you, there's $10. Yeah, even a student may be able to afford $10 for a speeding ticket. Next time I see you speeding at that rate, I write you a ticket, and your fee for speeding like that is $600. Okay. For you, that's a lot of money. For me, that's a lot of money. $600. Okay. So the $10 didn't work at all to deter us, but the $600 did. Are you going to speed again? This actually happened to me. There's a street in Denver that's the speed limit is 25, and I will not go over 25 on that street because I got a ticket for speeding there. And so there was great deterrence just on that street. But the difference is for these companies, if they get $1 million fine, that's no big deal. And Gil Guys showed that years and years ago with his case study of the GE, the electric scandal. He showed that they don't care. It's easier and cheaper just to pay the fine, and then they'll repeat. So fines typically do not work. Let's see, you could have societal retribution. People in some crimes, people get really upset. I think Madoff was a good example. Everybody heard about Bernie Madoff and his Ponzi scheme, a lot of victimization, a lot of money. It went on for a really long time. And unfortunately, even whether it's Madoff or any of these others, restitution is rare, that you would get your money back if you've been victimized by a white-collar criminal. People like to think, oh, good, we're going to have a class action suit. And lawyers advertise these in the United States. I don't know if you do it here in Portugal or not, but we have a class action suit. So we're all going to get together, including Rita, and we're going to sue the tobacco companies for causing cancer. And then we get more people in and more lawyers, and ultimately, who gets the money? We get a little bit of money out of the tobacco company. We might see a few dollars, but where's the chunk of money go? It goes to the lawyers, the middle people. And that's why lawyers advertise for those. They love class action suits. Who in this room is going to be a lawyer? lawyers online. Oops. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Okay. Doesn't at all mean they're bad people. And then we have to, of course, talk about victimization. If I can find the right button. So one of the things that people don't realize in the United States, they think that judges are all scary and all powerful. He's like, judges are like the Wizard of Oz, hiding behind that curtain, pulling all the levers. If you've ever seen that movie, one of my favorites being in Kansas. But the real power comes with the prosecutor in our system. And because they're making the decision on who to prosecute. They can say, well, I have enough evidence against you that I'm going to go ahead and take this to trial. So they have the power to make these decisions. They're not, if they don't feel like they have enough evidence, they are not going to prosecute, because what do they want to do? They want to win. And in some respects, I'm sure prosecutors would love me to say this, but in some respects, it's quite a political position, and prosecutors do want to go on and become politicians in many respects, at least in the United States. So they have the power to decide who goes to court and who doesn't. And sometimes they make stupid decisions. Sometimes they're making good decisions. Rita, how am I doing on time?
15 past 9.
Okay. Okay, good. So one of the things that the prosecutor has to look at all of these things. Do we have legal factors that actually are going to help me win this case? What does the law say? That what you did was actually illegal. We can't prosecute because it's immoral. You're my favorite person for agreeing with me. Or it's unethical. We can't do that, but we could figure out something. That's why in prosecution of white collar crime, you see a lot of mail fraud and insurance fraud, wire fraud, because it's kind of an all-encompassing wastebasket category. So easy for me to charge you with mail fraud or wire fraud. I can make that happen. The prosecutor, of course, carries the burden of proof. They are responsible for showing that you're guilty. Otherwise, you're all innocent until I show, as a prosecutor, that you're guilty. It's a pretty basic fact in our system. Kent, our CEO, at the beginning of this presentation, they're claiming that there's prosecutorial misconduct, that the prosecutor in the federal case, this federal case, is hiding evidence that would show that he is not guilty. So that's part of their defense, is that they're hiding evidence, because technically the prosecutor has to turn over any evidence that they have, even exculpatory evidence that shows that this person is not guilty. So that's what they're charging in that case, the defense is saying. Time and resources. Trials are expensive. If it's going to go to trial, it costs a lot of money, and you never know what might happen. Jurors are unpredictable. You just don't know what a jury may or may not do. Oftentimes, the prosecutor will move forward because of political pressure. So my doctors in California who were accused of stealing eggs and embryos and a lot of other things, insurance fraud and tax evasion, it was a media nightmare. It was front page news in the Los Angeles Times and Orange County Register every day. And there was so much media and political pressure. There was even Senate hearings over the whole thing, because I could steal eggs if I were inclined to do so, one of those doctors, and nothing happens to me. So they had a Senate hearing. So there was a lot of political pressure to go ahead and take these doctors to trial, have a trial. One doctor did. He was found guilty of insurance fraud. One doctor right now, 20 years later, this doctor just had a hearing in California and is working out a plea bargain. So he doesn't have to go to trial. He's been in, he fled the country and went to Chile. And so he was in Santiago practicing medicine. His son is a famous actor, I guess. I've never, Pedro Pascal. He changed his name so he wouldn't be identified with his father, but his son's a very famous actor, and he is working on a plea bargain so that he could come back to the United States after 20 years. It's amazing. And part of what they charged was conspiracy with the two doctors, that there was conspiracy. And in this plea bargain, he's admitting that there was a conspiracy to take cash money and not report it to the IRS. There's a whole list of things that popped up on my email messages, which I'm trying to ignore. But the other doctor, who is hiding out in Mexico City, keeps calling me. And so we've been talking about it because he thinks now that he might be able to get a plea bargain, a white-collar criminal. I assured him that he just needs to stay where he's at, and he's not going to probably get a plea bargain because I'll circle back around to where I started. I digress, but because of the political and public pressures to have somebody be accountable. Okay, so oftentimes it might depend on what the newspaper headline is. If there's actually going to be a trial or something's going to happen, and often white-collar criminals have money, right? Or stolen money, so they are able to have good defense lawyers. They are not picking up public defenders, and no offense to public defenders, who I think are quite talented, but they're going to have quite the dream team of lawyers helping them. A little bit like O.J. Simpson. So the quality of defense is something that the prosecutor has to consider. The other thing that comes up, who do we charge? We have a bank and there's just a big mess. There's tellers taking money. There's the bank managers taking money. The CEO is involved in a lot of things. The whole bank is corrupted. Do we go after the mid-level employees? Do we go after the top executives? Do we go after everyone? It is difficult to determine who we should actually charge with a crime. Do you charge the company? In the Ford case, it didn't work. So the jury found that the company in Ford was not guilty. Had it been a person, the CEO or someone on the board of Ford, maybe that would have turned out differently. Because a corporation is not a living, breathing thing. And we want someone to be held responsible, and just going after the corporation is not going to do that. And there are a lot of legal barriers to doing that. From a corporate perspective, I would say that what we're doing is just standard practice in the business. Everybody does it. Why shouldn't I do it? Okay, so if I'm engaging in insider trading, well, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I do that? And that doesn't work well as a defense. They try it, but it's not a very good defense that everyone else is doing it. So probably if you have corporate crime, the best person to go after is your CEO. That's what we saw in Enron when they went after Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling. Jeff Skilling was CEO of some part of it. Tyco, Dennis Kowalski, that was a big scandal for us. And all these happened at the same time in WorldCom. And the guy's name was Bernie Evers. So you go after the CEO, there's a person that we can actually charge with a crime. And probably not the lower level employees. The majority of cases are going to end in plea bargain, and that is our system overall, even for criminal acts. If we put everything through trials, it would be chaos. It would be a huge entire mess. So we rely on our system to plea bargain. You plea bargain things out, Rita? Plea bargains? No. Wow, okay. We love plea bargains in the United States. You can, in some plea bargains, you admit that, yes, I committed this crime. And then you can get a lighter sentence. You don't go to prison for as long. You can maybe not get any kind of prison sentence. You just have house arrest. There are different ways of determining what could happen to you once you plea bargain. And that's all settled before you go to the judge. And then the judge has to agree that this plea bargain is fair. And if you look at these cases, and these are federal cases, let's see, probably most shocking would be antitrust cases. 95% of those at the federal level are settled with a plea bargain. So you can see why I'm so excited about that trial that's happening. It's not a plea bargain, it's an actual trial with jurors. It's quite different than what we typically see with these plea bargains. A lot of people believe that plea bargaining is better because if you pick a trial and you have a jury and you have a judge, that if you're found guilty, you're going to receive a harsher sentence because you put the courts through so much pain and time and resources, more money, that you're likely to receive a more harsh sentence. I don't think there's research that confirms that, but that's the what they think. So plea bargaining is big for white collar crime. This is, we're going to see if this works. I hit the, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Go over here. Yeah, I thought we, oh, there's up there, it should be. This, can you see this okay? This graph, that looks good. This is the best one. This is from the US Sentencing Commission. So these are on federal crimes. And these are the number of offenders who were sentenced. Look at the drop there. So this starts in 2015. The data that I showed you on the plea bargaining was about 2016, so it was a little old. I'm sure that it's still up in the 90% for most cases, but what happens to the number of offenders who are charged, sentenced? It just, 2020, we see this continuation of a drop. What happened here? Well, our administration changed. When you have a white-collar criminal running your country, it's unlikely that you're going to have a lot of white-collar cases, or that the Department of Justice or the FBI are going to go after white-collar criminals. And that truly explains the, I think, let's see if I can be wrong. I could be wrong, but in this case, I think it was because of our administration. And I have, I won't go down this rabbit hole, but Trump is one of the worst white-collar offenders we have seen in our generation. Absolutely devastating that we would have someone like that in the United States running the country and committing all these white-collar crimes. And the people around him, who some of them have been sentenced and pardoned. One of them is going back to prison. I think it was Steve Bannon, one of his flunkies, his minions, I like to call them his minions. But so that's what happens. So you can see how politics might play a big role in this. Right now, I think that Joe Biden is just too busy with all the other stuff going on that this is not going to be a big deal for following white-collar crime. The other thing is the FBI, after 9/11, when the Twin Towers blew up, the FBI gave up white-collar crime. They quit going after white-collar criminals. So we saw a huge decrease then, because they were focused on terrorism. So I had a friend at the FBI and said, Mary, they pulled us all off white-collar crime because he loved to do those cases. They pulled us all off and now we do terrorism. So it also depends on what's happening in the country and the with the FBI. Yeah, just so you know, right now we are at the lowest level of in 30 years. If you go back beyond 2015, for 30 years, we're at the lowest level of prosecution ever for white collar crime in the United States. So the FBI, federal prosecution for the FBI, 3% of their cases were white collar crime. That's not very much. Fines during the Trump administration just didn't happen. Not at all. The interesting, and I won't go off on this again, I promise, but the interesting thing about Trump is that he committed white collar crime out in the open. And Henry Pontel has written a really nice article that was published recently on the normalization of white collar crime. So if I do it right in your face, then it's okay. You recognize I'm doing it and nobody cares. And that's what Trump did to us. But we're at a point now where the best option for prosecution is a deferred prosecution agreement. And these are the research that one of my students, Megan Parker, and I did, and Jay Albanese is also a scholar in the United States working on this, but this is kind of the go-to tool for prosecutors now, is to go to deferred prosecutions. So this way the corporation can avoid any kind of criminal charge. Good. You don't want to be a criminal or labeled as a criminal, certainly. And you just agree as a corporation, the board and the CEO, you agree to certain terms that you're going to do. So you're not going to do the same thing and break the law anymore. Let's say you're going to clean up the working conditions and make it better for employees because that was problematic in your factory. Companies can avoid any kind of stigma this way. Most of us are not watching deferred prosecutions and we don't know that they're happening. So the hospital that you're going to, yeah, we don't know that they're under a deferred prosecution. These are public and, you know, at first we thought there was no national database, but there seems to be. I just don't know if we can get to it yet. So I'll have to ask, do some more research on that. It helps the company if it's a good company, they're going to follow the terms that they're supposed to. And there's supposed to be an auditor who comes in and checks and makes sure that they're following the agreement. And it saves them from corporate debt. Once the CEO, like DaVita Inc., that place is out of business now. I mean, think about it. They killed patients. They used the wrong, they messed with insurance companies. They violated antitrust law. That company is gone. They can avoid corporate death by doing a deferred prosecution. And so it's deferred means that if they can get through all the terms of the agreement for however many years, then they're off the hook. Yay, we're good. If they mess up, that's a better word. If they mess up, then they can be prosecuted. But oftentimes there's very little oversight on these agreements. And sometimes the person who's in charge, they know nothing about the company. So it could be anyone who's supposed to go in there and make sure that they're following the rules of their deferred prosecution. It also allows the government to get fines and restitution, which is a good thing. So this is the go-to tool. We have lots of legislation, and I'm not going to go into detail because it would be way too boring. It's late at night, but there's lots of legislation that can be used to charge white-collar criminals. As we know, the Sherman Antitrust Act is one of the oldest. It actually came out of people who would have guns during the war and then would sell them when they weren't supposed to and hide them. There were all kinds of things. I can't remember the exact history, but 1890. So we have implemented different laws, especially insider trading. Probably the one that has been the most effective financially is the Oxley Act, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, because this demands that you have an outside auditor come in and check your books. So that's what happened with Enron. They had Arthur Andersen coming in, the fourth largest auditing firm in the United States, coming in and checking their books to make sure everything was being done according to the law. And Arthur Andersen was shredding documents. So Enron actually took down Arthur Andersen. They corporate debt because they helped with the fraud. But that has been one of the most effective that we've implemented in the United States. Sentencing white collar criminals. Yeah, we could get excited if we look at the bottom part of this. People that were sentenced, Bernie Madoff, the largest, I think the largest Ponzi scheme ever in the history of the United States. Hundreds of victims in that scheme. Lots of headlines, although Martha Stewart overtook the headlines off of them, took some of that off for me. But he was sentenced to 5 years? 150 years in prison. Huge. Everybody saying, yay, finally. And that's ridiculous, right? 150 years in prison. In fact, I think he already died, but it's not funny. 150 years, but the sentence was to show people that we're going to take white collar criminals seriously, and we're going to engage in punishment here. When you look at Jeff Skilling, he was part of Enron. He was probably the most corrupt person, even more so than the CEO, Ken Lay. And he was sentenced to 24 years. Often, even someone who has committed homicide doesn't get a sentence that long. And from what I can gather here, 25 years is your maximum. So the thought of 150 years or even over that is crazy. And then Bernie Evers, he's WorldCom, he received 55 years. So those are pretty, for white collar crimes, those are pretty harsh sentences for these criminals. But then you look at the other side of it, and I know this seems like there's gender bias here because I have two women on the top, but it's just the way it happened. And I'm talking about women and gender. But if you look at Martha Stewart, she was charged with conspiracy and lying to the FBI. Okay, so don't ever lie to the FBI because then they can come back and say you lied to us, so we'll charge you. She was not charged with insider trading. Okay, she was on a plane. She got word that the stock on this pharmaceutical company was going to drop. The founder of the pharmaceutical company, Sam Waxel, was selling his stock. Told Martha Stewart's broker she sold her stock so she could save money. That's insider trading. Sam Waxel had inside information that they weren't going to approve the drug. Okay, insider trading. They did not charge her with insider trading because it's really a hard crime to prove. They found something else. And Martha Stewart was disliked. She was treated quite harshly in the media. And I think it's true that the prosecutors and the FBI, they really didn't like Martha Stewart. But she received a light sentence. She 5 years in what they called Camp Cupcake. And so in a minimum security facility. And then she also had, I want to say it was 5 months of home detention with an ankle bracelet. So that's a pretty light sentence. Dennis Kowalski, his sentence was 8 years. And this happened about the same time that WorldCom and Enron happened. He stole from Tyco, this company, $100 million.
Porra, desculpa não te atender, cara, que eu tô aqui na rua. Eu tô aqui em Portugal. Nossa, paradamente.
I'm so sorry. That's okay. This guy was so bad. Well, actually, if you're married to him, maybe, well, you wouldn't want to be married to the guy, but he was so bad. He spent $2 million giving his wife a birthday party. I was on a private island, and there, I mean, it was actually really luxurious and beautiful. Can you imagine $2 million for your birthday? Yeah, on your party. So if you get a chance, it's interesting to look at the pictures they have of that birthday party. There's a couple of them, but that's not a long sentence compared to the others. Now, Elizabeth Holmes, I don't know if you've heard about her, but she was a CEO of a company, a startup company in Silicon Valley in California. And she, the company was called Theranos. It was going to be a company that could test your blood, just a little tiny sample of blood, and see if you had any problems or diseases. And she scammed people out of millions and millions of dollars. Her trial, she was found guilty. I can't remember exactly what the charge was. Anyway, she was found guilty. She has not been sentenced yet. So her sentencing is going to happen, I think, in September. What's interesting is to see, for me, I'm really excited, and this happened when I was teaching white collar crime, so I was really excited about the case. There's a wonderful book about her case by a journalist, and I can't remember his name, and I think it's called Bad Blood. It's a great book. You can't, it's just a story you can't put down. It's so fascinating. But it will be interesting because one of the things that happened is her idol was Steve Jobs, Apple. And so she dressed like him with black turtlenecks, and she was very severe, always pulled her hair back into a bun. She changed her voice so that she kind of talked like a man. She did it much better than I do, but so that was her idol, and she was trying to be just like him. And then when it came around for her trial, she let her hair down, soft and pretty, like your hair, and she changed the way she dressed. She was married. She got married to a nice man and had a baby. Now, the question is, are all these factors going to influence the kind of sentence she might receive? It will be really interesting because it was a huge scandal, and a lot of money involved, and a lot of important people that she scammed. And former Secretary of State, what was his name? The other guy, Henry Kissinger. She got money out of him. There's a whole list of really famous people that she had money, and they were all men, which is interesting. I find that case fascinating. But so let's wait and see what happens. So I made some promises to keep up with you, to read on some of these issues, because it's so much fun. Is that it? I think that may be my last slide. Nope. Well, we've kind of gone over all of these. That's it. I mean, I don't have to talk about that much. There's a lot of things they can do, whether it's probation, deferred sentencing, community service, where you do nice things for the community. Just real quickly, in the future, we're going to have to catch up with technology, especially on investigations and understanding what kind. And I think cybercrime is its own separate area. It's not white collar crime, it's a different area. But we're going to have to figure out how they commit white collar crime using technology. There's been talk about going to professional jurors. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Professional, so we pick jurors that have an understanding of how companies work, or understanding of how accounting works, rather than just somebody who doesn't know anything about a big business. So there's been talk about that. I don't think that that's something that they could possibly do, but there's consideration. investing more time and resources in white-collar crime, and I don't see that that's going to happen. And of course, with everything, whether it's white-collar crime or it's drugs or any kinds of fraud, looking at alternative to incarceration. Incarceration is not the answer. And so as a system, we've got to change that. It just is really, I believe firmly that there are other things that we can do. And white-collar criminals adjust quite well to prison. They do well in prison. There's studies out that show that they make this adjustment really well. I think community service, you could do better. There have been several white-collar criminals that now give lectures or help the FBI. There's the Leonardo DiCaprio guy who played Frank Abagnale, who now works with the FBI. He's a very famous kind of con man and white-collar criminal. And then that's it for me talking. Okay. Yay. Thank you. You're way too kind. Do we have time for questions, or did I blow it?
And I think it's perhaps some minutes for questions, if you don't mind, Mary, take the time. So for those who are attending on Zoom, please, you can use the chat to either ask questions, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question directly to Mary. And also for those who are in the room, if you have any questions, I'm sure Mary will have some time to answer them. I'm just going to go through some comments that people left. Okay. So Kelly helped out with the author of Bad Blood, John Carreyrou. And there's a, yes, thank you. And there's also a podcast. And we at Miss Chris, at our project on misconduct in entrepreneurship, used the Theranos example quite a while as a case of misconduct in entrepreneurship and how you go around defrauding investors and asking for money for a business that doesn't exist. I also put down the link for Herring Pontel conference that she did for us as well some time ago. Also, Kelly says that apparently the trial of the CEO that you were presenting got delayed a week for unknown reasons.
I hope they delay it for a month. So I see this. I was texting my student, frantic, go to this trial.
And now you have Celia thanking you for your presentation, and
nice.
Kelly thanking you as well, and Joanna, you already know Joanna as well. So there are some thank you notes for your presentation.
Oh, that's sweet.
Are there any questions in the room?
Yes, sir.
When you were finished, you say that in the future it's important to put alternatives to the incarceration. One thing that the white collar the Irish way is involved to go to prison. For them, that they have the status, a way of life very far from the life they experience in prison. Would be incarceration, this make a difference. If you put alternatives to incarceration, maybe you will diminish the difference factor that incarceration becomes them.
This is why these kind of presentations and it's so important. What a great study that would be. If they could see that there is specific deterrence for the white collar offenders once they get out, and you have a student who's maybe interviewing women who have been in prison. Joanna, yeah.
We might work for probation, but for crimes, and that we need to see. And also, Katrina works on the probation services and is very interested in knowing how to make a risk assessment for offenders on if they're going to, commit new crimes or not. Yeah.
But on your risk assessment, do you have a different one for white collar criminals? Because they're not going to have the typical risk factors that you see.
That's the problem, because we don't know yet if the general risk factor or the risk factors general factors apply to the white collar offender.
I think you might be right. That maybe the shock, maybe that's an answer is shock incarceration. So you take them, put them in prison for a really short time, shock them, and then they're deterred. Shock incarceration could be an answer if in fact it would deter them.
But it's also true that in prison they adapt very well. And they often are like the leaders of the other incarceration because they have money and they have power in prison.
Yeah, absolutely. Even Dr. Ash, when he was arrested in Mexico, he was in prison in Mexico City, they offered him special privileges because he was a white collar offender, they knew he had money and those kind of things.
And also, Portugal, we have a different that for us, this analysis that the purpose of prison is to is means for resocialization, reintegration. So that's the stated aim of prison. Prison cannot be sentenced just for retaliation and vengeance. Its aim is to help offenders to get back to the community. And in the case of white collar offenders, usually they are very well. They are well. So the community, they have stable lives. So it's a bit hypocritical for Portugal if you want to send someone for prison when they have no need to be reintegrated into society because they're already quite well integrated into society. We also have questions on the chat. I don't know if you want to.
Oh,
Yeah.
What's Jay doing up there?
Celia, do you ever think that it would be important to have support with the media about the need and the magnitude of white collar crime, change the public perception about it, or even the working people, the middle class employees in those companies? Maybe it would be a way of balancing the political influence so that so many kinds of white prosecution. So have the media come in to change the public awareness of white collar crimes.
I think that would make a huge difference. So we know that people look at the headlines, social media. And so if there was more, I think that that's a great idea, that we could probably do a better job of reducing white collar crimes. The other problem, and this could apply to the media too, is we treat whistleblowers like they're poisonous. And often how we're finding out about white collar crime or corruption is through whistleblowers. And then the stigma that they suffer, the retaliation that they suffer, and we have laws in the United States, state level and federal laws. They're not supposed to do that, but we treat whistleblowers terribly. Even you just say whistleblower and people think, ew, tattletale, rotten person. They're not. They're doing the right. They're trying to do the right thing, and people and the media, they're just. And I read someplace there was going to be maybe it was in Colorado, a conference on whistleblowing, the young man that his grandfather was part of the Theranos scandal, had invested a lot of money, General Schultz, I think, and the young man was a whistleblower, and his grandfather didn't believe him when he said, this is a scheme. And he said, no, it's not. So he became a whistleblower and nobody liked him. It's hard to be a whistleblower, so we need to treat them differently. That would make a difference, and we could treat them differently in the media. Yeah.
Jay. Maybe you can find out where that's in Portugal. Jay, you should be next. You're welcome. Questions? Why do you make that in the US defining numbers of investigations and prosecutions?
Well, Jay, we don't know. You're the one person I can say, well, if we know anything, you probably know that answer. Jay Albanese is quite famous in the world of white-collar crime. We all read his work. He was, I give him credit for writing one of the very first papers many years ago. I won't age him, I won't rat him out, but on women and white-collar crime. I was shocked when I found that paper. I had to dig for it. So I think right now, Jay, and you could talk. Can we let Jay talk? I don't. He's probably off washing his dishes or something, and just has his face up there. But
hi Jay, I don't know if you can hear me, and if you want to speak with us for a bit, if you want to turn on your mic or not, it's up to you, but maybe you can dialogue a bit about the causes for declining numbers of investigation. Hi Jay.
hi, Jay.
I can see that you have your mic on. Oh yay.
Yes, Rita, very good to see you.
How are you?
Very
Nice to
well,
talk to
thank you. It is good to see you and Mary, even though you're on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, you should fly over here as well. You would be very welcome.
No, I just took the opportunity to ask Mary a difficult question in front of many people, that's all.
He does that to me all the time. Jay, I think part of, in the United States at least, part of it is that it's okay to commit white collar crime now. It's okay. Nobody really cares.
Well, yes, it is true that elections have consequences, and
Yes.
we have seen it in the US.
Mhm. And I don't know, maybe that will change. Maybe, I mean, there's so many great research questions from your question. That, you know, what are the trends and what's driving it? I think you asked a question that there's no answer for yet.
No, just a quick comment, and then I will be quiet. A quick comment is, I just did an analysis of all prosecutions by the US government over 30 years, and it did document there's been a fairly dramatic decline in white collar prosecutions over the years. And so I was looking to see, well, if we are not focusing in the US on white collar crime, what are we focusing on? So I looked at, drugs and organized crime and all the things, and they were all dropping. And of course, the largest category of prosecutions in the US now are immigration prosecutions. The US has criminalized immigration. As you know, in the past, that was a civil offense that you resolved through fines and that kind of thing, but now they're being prosecuted criminally. So it was really a little bit embarrassing to see that by far the largest category of prosecutions currently in the US are immigration offenses rather than white collar crime, corruption, or other kinds of things we could agree are more serious. But anyway.
That makes me sad that that's what you found. But again, look at our former administration. That had to have been why that's happened.
Well, thank you for letting me talk. And Mary, I'm very jealous, and enjoy some good food and some port wine. Thank you.
Oh, I'm having a great time. Thank you. And I love port. So, it's great to see you, Jay. Take care. I'll see you in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So we are coming to an end in our class. Oh, Anna has one last question.
I was thinking about the little back homes. And I was wondering if
that since she dressing like a man and acting like a man, I was wondering about the masculinization theory of President Adler. Could it exist some link between the way Elizabeth was acted and the theory of Adler's theory about the emancipation of women and attempt to have power by acting like a man?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and certainly. Actually, I really have to give this a thought process, but would she be more successful if she took on that kind of masculine persona? And I believe the answer is yes. I don't want to say that, but as a more masculine manner, she's going to be seen as assertive, not aggressive. She's going to be seen as somebody that you could maybe, gosh, this is terrible. There's so much sexism out there. And somebody you could take more seriously than if she had on, I don't know, a fancy Lady Gaga dress, or I don't know, whatever it is. If you think about it, Frida Adler will say that she did not mean for her theory to come out as a masculinity, emancipation hypothesis kind of stuff, that she really believed, and this is years later when I interviewed Frida, that, let's see if I can wrap this up really quick. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, you're human. And so that was kind of her final words on, and she's still alive, but that's how she summed it up. And so that book was taken a little bit out of context. And Rita wants me to. Oh, she has a question.
The other way around, because she was quite a femininity element and her role in the female, role, because she had a TV show or something, she was well known.
Yeah, she was domestic diva.
Yeah.
She did a cooking show. And I don't, you've probably never seen it, but she did her mother on there. She was mean. But she had a cooking show. She had a girly magazine. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, she was very well known for being a domestic diva. Yeah. Yeah.
And we know how
Well, yeah, and somebody Carol Stable did an analysis of the number of times Martha Stewart was mentioned in the newspaper in New York, the big newspapers, versus Ken Lay, whose crime was so much more serious. And the highest number went to Martha Stewart. I wish I could remember the numbers, but it's a clever article that she wrote. It's a short one, but the newspapers focused on Martha Stewart, and they focused on what she was wearing and what kind of bag she was carrying. We don't do that with men when they're going to trial. So, yeah. Other questions? We finished?
I think now it's time to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you for all those who are on Zoom.
Yep.
Kelly,
Thank you.
Hope to see you all very, very soon. Stay tuned for more open classes and conferences here at the department at the School of Criminology, and hope to catch up really soon. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.